People suddenly stop respecting you, and you do not notice it happening in real time. But here is what is actually going on. Why people suddenly stop respecting you is not random. It is a gradual social downgrade in how they perceive you. And it usually starts while you are still acting normal. You are still speaking the same way. Still behaving the same way. Still thinking everything is fine. But something has already changed. You are being slightly interrupted more, taken slightly less seriously, responded to with less attention. Not openly, not aggressively, subtly. And the most dangerous part is this. You interpret it as nothing. So you keep behaving the same way, while your social position in their mind is already shifting. And that delay between reality and perception is where the entire system operates. Because social downgrade does not announce itself, it updates silently. Think about someone who used to treat you differently. At first, everything was smooth, fast replies, warm tone, curiosity, presence. Then slowly something changes, replies take longer, tone becomes flatter. Energy becomes minimal, and you feel it, but you cannot explain it, so you start guessing. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are stressed. Maybe it is unrelated to you, and because you cannot find a clear cause, you default to one behavior. You adapt. You become more careful, more polite, more agreeable, more easy to deal with, and here's where the shift happens. You think you are fixing the connection, but you are actually confirming the new position they have already started assigning to you. Because people do not respond to your intention, they respond to your pattern. And once your pattern becomes predictable, it becomes the model they use to interact with you. Not occasionally, always, even when you are silent, even when you are kind, even when you are trying. And this is where most people misunderstand respect completely. They believe respect is stable, that you earn it through one thing, achievement, status, intelligence, confidence, but reality is more unstable than that. Respect is not a possession, it is a constantly updating prediction. Every interaction either strengthens that prediction or weakens it slightly. Not dramatically, not visibly, just enough to accumulate over time. Until one day the behavior of others changes without a single obvious reason. And now you are trying to understand something that was never stored as one event. It was stored as a pattern. And patterns do not feel like change. They feel like sudden shifts, but they are never sudden. Every person you interact with is running a silent process, not conscious, not verbal, a predictive scan. What happens if I push this person slightly? What happens if I interrupt here? What happens if I delay response? What happens if I increase pressure? Not because they are testing you intentionally, but because the brain builds understanding through reaction. And the fastest way to understand someone is to see what they tolerate. So every interaction becomes a quiet experiment, and you are not aware you are inside it. One, not what you want, what you tolerate. Someone interrupts you once. You ignore it, not because you approve, but because it feels insignificant. Then it happens again. You still ignore it. Now something changes in the other person's brain. A rule is being formed. No resistance here. And once that rule forms, it becomes the foundation for future behavior. Because the brain is efficient, it does not reevaluate from scratch every time. It builds shortcuts, and those shortcuts become your social identity in their mind, not who you are, but how you function in interaction. Now the loop begins. They interrupt slightly more. You adjust slightly more. They take more space. You make more space. They lead the rhythm. You follow the rhythm. And neither of you consciously agreed to this structure. It emerged automatically through repetition. And what feels like a normal conversation to you feels like a stable hierarchy to them, not because they are dominant, but because you became predictable in response. And predictability always creates structure. Here is where it becomes even more subtle. This system does not depend on big moments. It depends on micro signals. You respond too quickly. You explain too much. You soften disagreement. You laugh when uncomfortable. You avoid silence. Each of these seems harmless. But perception is not built from meaning. It is built from repetition. And repetition becomes identity faster than intention ever could. So people are not reacting to what you think you are showing. They are reacting to what you consistently demonstrate under small pressure. And that distinction is everything. Because under pressure, identity is revealed. Not declared. Now here is something uncomfortable. The more you try to be liked, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you become, the easier it is to override you socially. Because there is no resistance. And without resistance, there is no perceived structure. No structure means no anchoring. And without anchoring, people do not hold respect for you. They drift in how they treat you, which feels like inconsistency from your side, but it is actually consistency from theirs. They are responding to the version of you they have built through repeated observation. Now, here is where the system starts to affect you internally. Because humans do not only observe social feedback, they absorb it. When you are interrupted and do not respond, you become slightly less assertive next time. When your opinion is ignored, you express it more carefully next time. When your boundaries are not acknowledged, you stop expecting them to be respected. And slowly, without noticing, you begin adapting your identity. Not in belief, in behavior, and behavior always wins over belief. So you do not consciously become less confident. You become less resisted, and that feels like internal change, but it is actually external conditioning. Now, something deeper is happening in the brain. The brain is constantly scanning for certainty signals, not intellectual certainty, behavioral certainty. Who pauses without discomfort, who does not rush to fill silence, who does not over-explain after decisions, who does not change tone immediately under pressure. These signals operate below awareness, but they define perceived stability, and stability is what people label as respect, not morality, not kindness, not effort. Stability. So when someone becomes too flexible, they lose anchoring in perception, not because they did something wrong, but because they became harder to predict. And the brain always prefers predictability over admiration. Now here's the shift point. The moment you introduce disruption into the pattern. A pause where you normally respond immediately. A no without justification. A silence you do not rush to fill. A boundary stated without softening it instantly. At first it feels noticeable, because it breaks expectation. And whenever expectation breaks, the brain reacts, not emotionally first, structurally. It tries to recalibrate, so people may test you, they may repeat old behavior, they may slightly increase pressure, not because they dislike you, but because they are trying to update the model of you. And this is where most people fail. They interpret testing as rejection, so they return to old behavior. And the system locks back into its previous structure, but if you remain consistent, something changes. Testing decreases, then disappears. Not because people respect you more emotionally, but because their predictive model has stabilized again, and stability always wins. Because stable systems require less cognitive energy. Now here's the most important part of the entire mechanism. Respect is not a decision, it is a model. A constantly updated one. Every interaction either reinforces it or slightly alters it. And over time, these micro-alterations accumulate into what feels like personality-based treatment. But it is not personality, it is pattern recognition. And now the uncomfortable truth appears. You are not just receiving behavior, you are participating in building it. Every response, every silence, every boundary, every adjustment. It all becomes data. And that data builds the version of you that other people interact with automatically. Not the version you imagine, but the version you consistently demonstrate. And this is why people suddenly lose respect. Not because something changed in one moment, but because enough small moments went uncorrected that the model updated itself. And once a model updates, it feels instant, even though it was gradual. But there is also a second layer here, because anything built through repetition can be rebuilt through repetition. The brain does not update based on intensity. It updates based on consistency, which means you do not need a dramatic transformation. You need small, repeated deviations from the old pattern. One pause instead of immediate response. One clear no without explanation. One moment of silence instead of filling discomfort. One boundary held without softening it immediately. At first, the system reacts because it detects inconsistency. But inconsistency is not a threat. It is a signal. A signal that the model is outdated. And now recalibration begins. People may push slightly. They may test. They may observe more carefully. Not to reject you, but to understand the new version of you. And if you remain consistent, the system resolves. The model updates. And behavior stabilizes again. But now at a different level. Not lower, not higher, more accurate. And this is the final realization. You are not just in social reality. You are actively constructing it through repetition, through patterns, through what you allow to continue without correction. And the uncomfortable part is this. Most of your social outcomes are not decided in big moments. They are decided in the small ones you ignore. Now here's what most people miss. The moment you change your micro-responses, people around you do not instantly respect you more. They simply stop being able to rely on the old version of you. And that creates space. Not emotional change, structural change. And over time, that space becomes your new position. But only if you do not collapse back into old patterns under pressure, because the system will test you again, not to punish you, but to confirm what version of you is stable. So the real shift is not awareness, it is consistency after awareness. If this video made you recognize yourself in these patterns, do not ignore that reaction. That reaction is the point. Because most people will watch this, agree for a moment, and then go back to the same micro behaviors tomorrow, and nothing changes. But if you actually understood this, you will start noticing the exact moments where you usually adjust and choose not to. Even once a day is enough to start shifting perception. Now I want you to reflect on something specific. In your current relationships, where are you being treated in a way that feels slightly off, but you keep accepting it because it is easier than correcting it? That is the exact place where your pattern is forming. If this video changed the way you see social behavior, subscribe, because this channel is built around exposing the systems behind human interaction, not just the surface behavior. And I want you to leave one honest comment below. Where do you think people are currently misreading you the most? Because the way you answer that question already reveals part of the pattern you are living inside.